Hello, welcome. I'm Delores Fortuna, and this is For Art's Sake. Well, welcome to the 2013-14 Parkland Ceramic Biennial, and it's called A State of Art, of Contemporary Art, and my name is Delores Fortuna, and I am the curator for the show, this year's show. I wanted to start with Don Pilcher because he kind of epitomizes the theme for the show and the concept for the show, which is to highlight artists who are risk takers and who have used their craft to really push forward ideas and to challenge the ways that they problem solve and also move their work forward. So Don is a very iconic clay artist. He became well known in the 80s for his work in vessel making. He was a professor for I think 30 years at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and was a major influence in the direction of clay in the 80s and 90s. He took a hiatus of 12 years. He's and re-emerged about 8 or 9 years ago with a completely different body of work, which was totally fascinating in the reinvention. And coupled with that emergence was writing. So he would say that the body of work that he's now doing really embraces a lot of aspects of how he interacts with the world, and the clay making skills and technical knowledge that he gained from his earlier career, he kind of really embodies in his new pieces. So the writing is really important, as is the visual presentation of these ideas. It's called Rascalware. There's a website for it. There's 12 chapters. Each one of the chapters kind of explores a topic. So you're welcome to delve further into this body of work by, going to the website and going on to Rascalware. The other thing also that in this show, and Don Pilcher also signifies it, is how important the catalog is for this show. We asked artists to submit images of their previous work or work that they were well known for, or the work that they used when they established their careers, but also to write a more personal statement about what motivated them to change their work. And so please access the catalog to kind of delve farther into artists that you find interesting. This is contrast with Mary Behringer. She's a East Coast artist. I think she lives in Vermont. She describes herself as a very, very slow maker. And she does hand-built slab work, fires and oxidation. And one of the aspects of her work that I've always found really engaging are her surfaces. And so she works very meticulously, works back and forth. So we have, again, a range of work here, and the shift is more subtle in her work. And so I think we can have artists that shift dramatically and artists that shift subtly. And so in the gallery installation, which I really thank Louise for, is almost contrasting these kind of change, but change which can be, again, very dramatic or very subtle. Her work has a sculptural feeling, and again has a real strong form consciousness that I think, especially as you walk around her work, you start to see the relationships between the pieces that she's playing with, and also just the color values throughout the forms. Another artist that I chose, who I've followed since he was a grad student in Minneapolis, is Sam Chung. And this body of work kind of really goes with the images of clouds. And his earlier work, the pieces were more frontal. His concern is usually working through vessel forms. And the body of work that he's showing here has kind of stayed with those themes. The work is much more rotational, and he's incorporated more information from his Korean background. And he uses kind of, again, that the imagery of clouds is significant to him culturally. And so this is a teapot, again, and the line element, besides just the forms, is what he's really has, one of the changes that's the difference in articulation. One thing I really like about his work, Sam's work, is the subtlety. So this piece, you can read it as, again, a cloud jar. And in Asian culture, there are jars, there are moon jars, there are jars that relate to physical aspects. And what is really so powerful here is that the reference to his classical heritage is just very subtle. Both, this is a very classical foot, this is a very classical ending to this bottle. It wouldn't have to be there, but because it is there, he's kind of challenging us to start to make some references outside just the beauty of the form. So again, very subtle work. Like Mary, he's a very slow and meticulous craftsman. So one thing that's really wonderful about the show is to just enjoy the high quality of craft that of the actual pieces that you don't totally get from just seeing the images. So again, I think, especially in the teapot, it's just really a pleasure to look at because it's so well crafted. What I want to do now is swing over to another artist. This is Sean O'Connell. And again, this show is really, really enjoyable to me because with all the people in the show, I've followed their careers. Some of them I know personally. Some of them I've just really enjoyed their work over a long period of time. And so part of the pleasure of curating a show is to put together people that you see something and you enjoy their work. So that's part of the pleasure. His work is, I met Sean when he was just done with his undergrad studies, and he was teaching at an art center in Chicago. And he is someone who's always had a passion for clay. Like Don, he started to do clay when he was in grade school and has a lot of technical expertise and ability and worked so hard to get into grad school. And so he asked me when he was applying to grad school to review his slides and to give him comments. So he, again, has a passion for clay and just knew that's what he wanted to do since childhood. And I think he kind of alludes to that in his artist statement. His work really evolved in grad school. He's about 5 years out of school. He went to grad school in Rochester and studied with Richard Hirsch, who is another one of our iconic artists. His work became much more fluid and generous and really developed surface statement. So his previous work before going to grad school was just really about the form and applying glazes that were just other people's glazes. And so in grad school, he really developed his surfaces, kind of freely admits that he enjoys decorating. And so a lot of this work is fairly complex with slip inlay and glazes that kind of flow and pull. And these pieces also are just really, really wonderful for the kind of generous forms that they have, but also these really wet fluid surfaces that flow. I'd like to introduce Julia Galloway's work. She moved to Montana about 3 years ago and was teaching at RIT, where Sean O'Connell received his graduate degree, and she was his teacher. So I think it's really fascinating in the clay world to have to work with students. I teach at the Art Institute in Chicago to really have them reach further into themselves and to offer them a lot of options to further develop their work. So you can see some tie-in, and I think it'll be really interesting to see Sean's work in another 5 years, because I think he's still digesting the wealth of information from his grad school experience. So her work is very strongly vessel-based, especially vessels that people live with and enjoy. She's a maker of objects that often have relationships between their parts. So she really enjoys making sets, like a teapot would have a receiving plate as a cream and sugar set. There's an elegance to her work, and also she uses a kind of inlaid slip and soda fires. So in her surfaces, you see this kind of really wonderful, soft kind of drifting quality. One of the things that's really interesting about a lot of the artists and their statements is they talk about the importance of place in their work. And for her, the physical living in the East Coast was very different to her experience in living in Montana. And she talks about that feeling of the big sky. So like Sam Chung, but in a different way, she's really interested in articulating this feeling of space and clouds and just really large exposed landscapes. We're Midwesterners, and so I think we also, and I teach in Chicago, and I have a lot of students that also talk about moving, let's say, from a rural environment into the city, and how, especially if they haven't lived in a large city before, how that impacts their consciousness of space, of time, of relationship between objects. So I think it was really fascinating to me that that's one thing that she really spoke to in her artist statement. She's just a beautiful maker. Her forms are exquisite. And again, the cups also kind of talk to the fact that she really works when she, in series, and really often talks about the relationship of an idea and how it kind of flows through the cups. So those are really a beautiful, almost panorama of a sky. And they're really meant to be enjoyed collectively. And also the little, almost like ewer shape with the tray. So I've been a long admirer of her work, both her craftsmanship and the way she explores her ideas. Richard Hirsch is our next artist, and I have, in my teaching career, referred to him many, many times to my students. He, in the catalog, he has a picture of a tripod, and he was really well known for that series of work, and did it for probably about 25 years. And then about 10 years ago, his work radically shifted, and he was no longer showing the tripod series. And the tripod series has a lot of references to art of the Americas. And that's the conical leg form is a form that's referred to a lot in traditional art. And when I saw this first series, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And I was really, and I knew that in the tripod series, there was a lot of iconographic kind of knowledge. There were a lot of references to culture, to myth. And it took me a while to really fully understand that these pieces were also talking about the same sources, but we're just exploring them. And in some ways, the elements that these are composed of are almost more literal. And Richard has a book that's coming out, I think, as we speak, that he kind of deciphers some of these forms for us. This is really a beautiful one. His surfaces are really exquisite and really kind of speak to the depth of knowledge that he has acquired in his long career in clay. So again, very, very enjoyable as just physical objects, but also to kind of really start to understand the meaning and the content through the forms that are represented. One thing that is interesting, and some artists will refer to this in their gallery statement, is a lot of artists establish a long-term relationship with the gallery, and the gallery that shows their work is very important in terms of giving them direction and advice, etc. And about 2 years ago at NCCA, which is the National Conference for Ceramic Artists, I had the pleasure of going to dinner with Richard, and I was very bold, and I said, "How come you changed your work so radically? What was going on?" And he said, well, it was, again, like Don, he just felt that he had kind of come to an end point with that other series. There was nothing more that he could say about it. He had done as many iterations of that work as he could possibly do, and had a hunger to kind of just approach a new body of work. But he said he had received a lot of pressure from his gallery not to do that, because they could sell as many of the tripod pieces as he could do. So I think both he and Don really speak to that kind of bravery to say, yes, I'm really going to listen to what my inner voice is telling me to do, and we're so glad that he did, because he brought this great work forward, and we can really enjoy its complexity.
This is a foundations class. This is kind of the gateway class. Drawing is applicable to anything that you do within art and design. It's about visual language. It's about learning how to think visually and communicate visually. When you draw, you take the three-dimensional world and you translate it onto a two-dimensional page. And so you're creating the illusion, the magic of a three-dimensional form on a flat surface. And that's the main thing that drawing one's about, and it takes some time to learn that.
It's really nice, like when you learn the techniques and how to apply those into actual application, and the output is amazing. Anybody can take classes, anybody can draw. If you have that passion, if you feel like doing it, just go for it.
In drawing too, there are more issues of content, and we do go into color pretty quickly, and it's a lot more individuality. The artist can come out, and again, it's the exploration of technique.
She really pushes you to go outside the box or try things that you wouldn't normally do on your own. I found that the professors here are really interested in the students and take the time out with them, and they don't try to push their style of art on you. They just try to refine your own skills, and they want you to keep, your twist on it.
This class is a little bit more expressive. I mean, individual-wise, you can express yourself a little bit more, and everybody has their own little style, so it's a little bit more laid back.
Drawing one focuses very much on structure and how to view the world, as in a very realistic way. We get to play with just all sorts of mediums and papers. It's fun. It's time-consuming, but it's very worth it if you really love to do it.
It's a teaching-focused place, so you're going to get personal attention more so than you will at other institutions, and I think that's the advantage.
What can your phone do?
We combine classes for Painting 1 and Painting 2 and hope that we get some of the experience for people from Painting 2 to rub off on Painting 1 students. It kind of helps them out, I think, with stretching canvas and preparing surfaces and just talking about color.
You don't only learn about painting, but you learn about drawing, you learn about color, you learn about shape, you learn about everything, and it's really fun.
It's been great. I've really enjoyed taking classes with Steve. Even though it's a beginning level class, he lets us be really creative.
I like the class to function as a group, and I want even the beginning students to confront the painting in an advanced way.
And it's a really nice class because you can learn from all the other students around. Parkland's really great because there's a lot of people that painted for a long time that take the class for fun, so you can learn from them.
The energy goes both ways. You know, the students that have painted before see the ingenuity of the younger students, and vice versa. So it's a really good, it's actually a good scenario.
Color really and what paint can do are the two things I want them to pull out of this class. And if I didn't mention independence, I'll mention that again. Independence is something that I really want them to have, that they can come out of here feeling that they have many different approaches to how to approach paint.
We have another artist that I'd like to speak to, and her name is Marion Kaufman, and also a person that I have really long admired. She is German and studied in Germany and then came to the United States and got her master's degree maybe about 10, 12 years ago from Minnesota. Her work is visually different in the context of the artist because her form sources are European postmodernism. So she would say that her form sources are very sculptural, like Brancusi, and for clay working she would go back to Hans Koper and Ruth Duckworth, British potters from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The series of work that she wanted to contrast were her vessel pieces, and recently what she did is shifted her studio practice to just wall installations. So again, they're constructed slab forms that come out from the wall and again have that kind of form consciousness. They're very, very subtle in both glaze and surface articulation. And important in her work, I think, is that sense of shadow and how they play against the space. And the installation here is just really wonderful because especially when I walked into the room, I really enjoyed how these three-dimensional forms really kind of worked with the pieces on the wall. So I think if you have a chance to come to the gallery and just really enjoy these in the space, that will kind of complete and give you a more fully experience of how these objects are working. There's also really a wonderful piece that's kind of highlighted against the wall over here, which I think, again, really has so much space around it. And it has a lot of the very subtle relationships and how the edges and the lines work. And again, to cast shadow, the isolation works. It just is really interesting how such a simple form can really hold that wall. So I think that's why gallery visits are really, really important. And again, walking through the show, it's just a pleasure to, kind of almost like walking through a garden to see to see these pieces in their places. I'd like to talk about my dear friend Bill Farrell's work. On the wall we have a sculptural piece. He also has had a very, very long career in clay, and his life story is pretty interesting. He came into clay very accidentally because he was a high school art teacher and had to do a clay class and spent the summer and I think at Alfred learning how to work on the wheel. And so again, like all of us, it's that kind of incidental experience that all of a sudden grabs hold of us and it becomes a lifelong career and passion. Some people that happened very early, like Sean and O'Connell and Don, and some of us it was just something that, you know, we had to do for a job, and all of a sudden it was like, yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Bill's work was very, very important in taking clay as a material outside of just vessel making in the 80s and 90s. And what he did is pushed material exploration and just the whole concept of what is clay. How do you work with it? How do you put surfaces on it? And so he did a lot with raw clay and latex, and these also are extruded clay tubes that are then put into kind of a language. And so he's talking about that flow of form and form becoming language. And a lot of his idea reference and sources come from other passions that he has, which are motorcycles and bicycles and cars. So he derives, again, so the tubes you can start to see as exhaust pipes on a motorcycle, if you wanted to make kind of a very literal reference. There's also kind of a bravery because he has an eroticism about his work that I think he's very, you know, not apologetic for at all, because he kind of sees that in some of his elements. These are covered with black latex, and he sees that as a very legitimate surface for clay. So again, it's really worth it to go farther into his career. He's got some other images of work in the catalog that are in the show, and he's another artist who, again, has really been very important in opening up how we talk about clay, how we work with clay, and again, has had some really, done some significant work in his past. About 10 years ago, he moved to Galena and built a wood kiln, and had not really been a vessel maker or a potter, shall we say, for many years. And he started making tea bowls, and he would see these as equal in concentration, focus, and intent as his sculptural pieces. He spends a lot of time with each of these, adding marks, making decisions about the foot, the rim, the undercut, the shadow. So as you look at these, they're incredibly enjoyable just for, again, the information, the marking, almost again the language. Like this is a language. He would see that he's almost putting a narrative of marking into these pieces. They're wood-fired. Many artists love wood firing because the way it subtly embraces the form and enhances the marking. So each of them are different, and when you wood fire, each piece is always going to be different. So that again adds to really the kind of the specialness of his work. So again, it's a really great visual experience, and just it's fun to be in the presence of the work of so many fine artists. So thank you.